I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell.
I can do the risk assessment if you want on this one.
Of course, as a former trader. Yeah, okay, well, we should have called you in to do that. I regret that. Great to see you. I think if we could just start with this whole issue of Europe.
Yeah.
Is there any difference between Labour's position on Europe and the Tories?
That's exactly as Chucker has said. Of course there is.
What is it?
Well, what's interesting, let's just go back over the history of this, because only, 8 months ago, there was no reference from the Tories about a transition deal, and we made it very, very clear there had to be a transition deal.
Yeah, but they're now on a transition deal, so it's the same as you.
Our argument, well, they've set this 2-year period. We've said as short as possible, but as long as necessary. So we've got this flexibility.
How long could as long as necessary be?
We think there's an element of flexibility beyond the 2 years that might be necessary in certain sectors as well.
Chucker says you're up to 4 years. Is that correct?
We need to make sure that we take into account all the different views that are coming in from industry in particular.
So it could be 4 years.
I can't see it being that long, but we'll see, because what we're trying to do is exactly... Chucker and I, there's not a cigarette paper between us. We've got exactly the same objectives, which is to protect our economy, protect jobs, and make sure we get the best deal possible.
There is more than a cigarette paper, because he wants the UK to stay in the single market forever, and you don't.
We've got a view in that, again, we're about objectives rather than structures. We keep saying this. Our view is that the single market at the moment, in terms of the decision of the referendum, is difficult to see how we can maintain with all the 4 freedoms that need to be guaranteed. However, you know, we're talking to our European colleagues what reforms can take place, how we can achieve a relationship which receives the benefits of the single market. So I think we're moving on in these discussions. And the key issue for us, and we've said it time and time again, there's a ready resolution to all of this that can protect all of us, both in terms of our European colleagues and ourselves, because we depend upon one another. And the big issue for us, and we've been saying it all the time, when you negotiate in Europe, look, I used to be a chief executive of a local government association. I had an office in Brussels. I negotiated on behalf of London. When you negotiate in Europe, you do on the basis of mutual respect and mutual interest. That's never been the case with the Tories. They've torn up, if you like, and thrown tantrums, and as a result of that, I don't think they're capable of getting a decent deal.
I'm sorry to sort of press you on this, but it is what people want to know. I know that your position is broadly all the benefits of the single market, but could it include continued membership of the single market?
We'll see in the negotiations what sort of structures that we can achieve those objectives through.
Because Len McCluskey, who's on the programme later, thinks that you can allay people's concerns about immigration simply by changing the regulation of the labour market in the UK. And he thinks you can therefore continue with the so-called freedom of free movement of people.
Well, we've said all the way along that what we wanted reforms, because Len's right, because what we didn't want is free movement being used to undercut wages and exploit workers here. And we think we can reach some agreement on that as well. So in that way, we think we can achieve all the benefits of the single market, overcome some of the disbenefits that were perceived in the referendum, in that way maintain close and collaborative relationship with Europe in all our interests.
But if you came up with a form of labour regulation that the rest of the EU thought was not infringing that freedom, you would stay in the single market,
it wouldn't be the single market.
Why not?
Well, it wouldn't be the single market as we now know it, because it's based upon those 4 freedoms.
But it would still... Well, it would still be the 4 freedoms.
It wouldn't, because those 4 freedoms would be adjusted, because that's the key issue about free movement. We believe... Well, OK, let me take you through it then, because we believe we can reform the free movement of people on the basis of protecting wages, etc.
Exactly.
So that would
that be counter to the European Union rules?
That would be a change. That would be a changed single market, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be the same single market that we've got now.
Would it be a change in Britain?
It certainly would be a change in Britain, because what we've been arguing for is protection of workers and their rights. We don't want the exploitation of free movement by employers to undercut workers' wages and undermine their working conditions.
So I think you are moving, it seems to me, closer to a position where some form of membership of the single market is possible.
A relationship which is based upon tariff-free access, the structures to be negotiated, but the objectives are the same.
Now, you've also been talking overnight about changes to student debt. Talk me through what you want.
Well, this has arisen out of, in our manifesto we made it clear we're going to scrap tuition fees.
Yeah.
That's it, because the system's imploding.
But you were criticised by the Tories for hinting that you would abolish student debt, and then it seemed as though you'd flip-flopped after the election.
We didn't flip-flop at all. Jeremy said in an interview, that we will deal with student debt.
Yep.
That's exactly what we're doing.
So what would you do?
Well, let me just go through what's happening at the moment.
Yep.
Because what we've heard is, as a result of our campaigning, the Tories now are looking at possible changes at the budget in terms of the tuition fee debt. Two things they're looking at is possibly changing the interest rates.
Yeah.
Well, the interest rates...
Would you support that?
Yes, I would.
Because can I just make a point about that? There is quite a lot of analysis that shows that if you cut interest rates, it disproportionately helps richer students.
Let me come on to the other reform. On the interest rates, they put them up to 6%. That's 24 times the base index. So it's outrageous.
But poorer students will never pay them because
the second issue then is they're looking at thresholds, which I'm more interested in.
Right, okay.
So I've said if they come forward with those proposals and they're effective in exactly the way you're saying, of course we'd support them.
Yeah.
But that still leaves the problem that they tripled tuition fees and they increased the interest rates to 6%. That still leaves that huge debt that they've landed upon these students now. The IFS have come forward and said if you wanted to eradicate that increased debt that the Tories have caused, cost 10 billion.
Yeah.
Now, I think...
And that's the debt accumulated by those...
their own increase, the Tory increase.
And so the debt... implicit on a 3,500 fee would stay. It's the debt between 3,500 and 9.
Two things we're going to do in the preparation for our next general election, our next manifesto. We're going to look at all the debt itself. But this Tory-imposed debt is doing two things. Massively putting a burden on young people. But secondly, it's exactly as the IFS has said as well, if they don't pay it off now, it triples. And the system itself is...
But that's the point I really want to ask you.
Let me just finish this point.
Sorry, of course.
Let me just finish this point. The reason I'm saying it needs to be done now is because 7 out of 10 students are not paying it. The system's imploding. And Andrew Adonis, as one of the ministers who brought it in, has made this point as well. The system is collapsing. At some stage, the government's got to rescue the system. IFS is saying, do it now, and it's the cheapest.
No, I mean, I get all that, and you're saying that if the government were to do it, you would support them. People obviously want to know, people who voted for you in the last election want to know, will you do that? Will you promise that at the next election?
The Tories have got us into this mess. I'm saying they've got to get us out of it. If they don't do it now, the system's going to implode anyway. So do it now, because it's going to be 3 times more expensive in literally 5 years.
It sounds like you would like to do it.
Well, we're looking at a whole range of proposals, and we'll come forward with those proposals. I think in many ways they'll be much more effective in the long term of getting a system in which education becomes free again.
John, thank you so much. We've just got to go for a quick break and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back. I'm delighted that John McDonnell hasn't been deselected. He's still with me. Great news. Public sector pay, you're against the 1% cap. What would be a fair rise?
Well, that'll be negotiated. That'll be negotiated. The whole point.
But more than inflation?
Well, we budgeted before the general election on the OBR figures about earnings rises. And that tackled inflation. It was slightly above inflation as well. So we budgeted for that.
But so you're on the hook for that,
Well, our own principle is about restoring collective bargaining, and that's what's needed. So government doesn't get interfere into these negotiations. Let the unions and the employers negotiate effectively.
Now, Len McCluskey, who is coming on after you, says there is a genuine risk of strikes. He doesn't like the union reform that says a strike's only legal if you get 30% of members voting, and therefore he's saying there may be illegal strikes in that sense. What is your view? If they don't reach these 50% thresholds, should they strike?
I think they will. I've been talking to Len and a lot of his members. I've been on picket lines at the BA cabin crew dispute, for example. I've been down at Bart's Hospital. I don't think there's been any problem about getting the
50%.
Yeah, there isn't, because people are pretty angry.
But if they don't get it,
they will.
But if they don't, John, should they strike?
They will. Look, I don't think anyone understands properly the strength of anger that there is out there.
No, I think we all understand there's a huge movement here, but nonetheless, for all sorts of reasons, they might not quite make the 50%.
They will.
But come on, give them advice. If they don't make the 50%, should they strike?
You've got a lack of confidence in the working class. I haven't.
I'm not sure that is the appropriate rejoinder. I think you're dodging, as people have noticed. You are dodging the question.
You watch what will happen this coming winter. These strikes have been provoked by this government, and as a result of really pay being below inflation, wages being cut. You know, we've got nurses going to food banks because their pay has been cut by 14% since these Tories have been in power. No wonder people are angry.
Right, another topical question. Do you use Uber from time to time?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Not to your knowledge? What does that mean, not to your knowledge?
I don't think I've ever... All right. hand on heart, I don't think I've ever used Uber.
And what do you think?
Well, I'll give you an example. Sometimes you book a car to come to pick me up, so you see. So
we've never booked you an Uber.
Oh, that's all right then. Well, I haven't
but what do you think, more importantly, about the revoking of its licence? The right thing?
Yeah, the company's a disgrace. You have to abide by the law, simple as that. If TfL have made, they're the regulating body, they've made a decision on this, the company's outside the law, what could TfL do? If they didn't do this, they'd be criticised anyway. So I think the company's at fault here. And they've had warnings, 4 months ago they were told to get their act together, and they still didn't.
Now, I've got two very quick questions to put to you. In Politico, there's a leak of an internal document which says that you want a rule change that would make Zionist criticisms not seen as anti-Semitic. Is that a sensible rule change?
I'm not aware of that, to be honest.
You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware of this, no.
But would it be a sensible change?
Well, I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on it, really.
And then finally, we always ask our viewers for a question to put to you, and it was a barrage, but there were quite a lot on a similar theme, so I'm going to ask you it. How do I grow a magic money tree?
Well, it's interesting, because I think what you could do is, first of all, contact Philip Hammond, because they found it when they wanted to pay $1 billion to the DUP, didn't they?
Well done. Listen, lovely to have you with us, and we'll see you again soon, I hope. All the best. So now I'm